Hey y'all, what's going on? This is CJ. I am going to talk to you today a little bit about electrolysis and cleaning metals with electricity and an electrolyte solution. And just so you know, I'm not trying to sound like a smart aleck and sound like a smarty pants, I guess, and sound like I know really what I'm talking about. I'm not a chemist. I used to be a chemistry minor, but not anymore, and I'm not trying to sound like I know it all in this video. I just get a little bit excited when I talk about science. So if I sound a little stuck up, I apologize for that. I'm not trying to be a jerk. With that said, I probably said a few things that aren't exactly scientifically spot on. I mean, I got my facts crossed a little bit. So if that is the case, just bear with me. I got a little excited there when I was filming that. So I hope y'all enjoy it. Basically what I'm just talking about is some do's and don'ts. And I kind of had to learn things as I went. So I think maybe you'll be able to avoid some of the mistakes I made. Alright guys. Hi guys. So this is my electrolysis setup. I'll go through this pretty quickly. I'll post some links in the video description of how you can build your own. So I'm really still working on this, but I've learned quite a few things from the process. So I was a chemistry minor. We have to take a lot of chemistry classes to be a biology major, and I was a chemistry minor up until last semester. So 3.5 years through college, I was a chemistry minor. So I know a little chemistry. Not a lot, but I'll try to explain to you what's going on here. So the idea of electrolysis is you pass electrons through a negative lead through your object you're trying to clean. They pass through the water and into the sacrificial metal of the positive lead back, I think, to the positive terminal of the battery. So then the particles of rust or oxides or sulfides or just whatever crusty stuff you're trying to remove from your good metal migrates over here to your sacrificial metal, which is why this is black. Okay, so first thing I learned in doing this, we'll call it an experiment. First thing I learned is you have to be really careful when you're doing this inside. So I started out using table salt instead of what I'm using now, which is baking soda or sodium bicarbonate. So table salt is sodium chloride. So when you put things in water, a lot of things break apart in water. So when I put this baking soda in, it breaks apart into sodium and bicarbonate ion, or carbonate ion. So the carbonate forms carbonic acid in the water, but that's a different story. So the sodium and chloride, and sodium chloride or table salt, breaks apart into sodium ion and chlorine ion. So when you run an electric current through water containing chlorine ions, it generates chlorine gas, which is very poisonous. It's been used in the war before. To my understanding, when you inhale it, it combines with hydrogen ions in your mucosal membranes, anything that's wet in your body, like eyes, nostrils, respiratory tract, and lungs, and forms hydrochloric acid, which HCl is used in a lot of things. It's very irritating and burns. So chlorine gas is very harmful. I think there's some other reasons too, but that's my understanding of it. So when I started doing this, I started passing current through the solution, and I realized there's chlorine gas being produced. And I shut it down immediately because I could smell the chlorine. I knew that wasn't supposed to happen, and I stopped the reaction. So what I'm doing now is with bicarbonate, it produces carbonic acid, but that's carbonic acid is very, very safe. The second thing I learned is for your sacrificial metal, the first thing I used was this copper. So to the best of my understanding, some of the copper dissolves in the water. And eventually this whole, if I was doing this with a lot more, we'll say power, that's not really the right word, but if I was doing this at a faster rate, all this copper would eventually dissolve into the water. That's a problem because copper is a heavy metal, which is poisonous. A lot of people use stainless steel for the reaction. Now stainless steel works really well, but stainless steel is composed of iron and chromium, and the chromates, or the chromium groups. They're polyatomic ions, for those of you that know chemistry. The chromate groups enter the water, and they are heavy metals. So they're harmful, but they're also, I think they're known carcinogens or cancer-causing chemicals. So chromates in water it's bad business. From the research I've done, if your water turns yellow and you're using what you think is stainless steel, or even if it doesn't turn yellow, if you're using stainless steel, the water you're generating is very, very toxic and shouldn't be poured out. And there are some ways you can get rid of it. I'm sure there's some ways you can reclaim the chromates from the water. Copper is a little less severe as far as I understand. Maybe not. You can reclaim copper by adding zinc to the water, and a displacement reaction will take place, and the zinc will be displaced, and the copper will take its place, and then you can kind of harvest the copper from the solution. But the other problem, kind of more practical problem, is I don't know if you can see this. This is a nickel that I had in the electrolysis, and this was hooked to my negative lead copper, and my sacrificial metal was hooked to my positive lead. So some of the copper came back across and plated the nickel. So the crap off the nickel plated the copper, but some of it, we'll call it backplated the nickel. So you can see there's kind of a coppery sheen to the nickel, and you don't want that if you're trying to clean something on what you're trying to clean, because now it looks kind of weird. And the same thing happened. This quarter's still kind of dirty, but I don't know if you can see it. This was on in there for a little bit. There's a little bit of a coppery sheen on here. Also some natural patina. So copper probably isn't the best thing to use. What should you use? I don't know if I have any here. I did have some, but I think it's rolled off the table. Graphite works really well. So graphite is just carbon. It's carbon bonded to carbon bonded to carbon in really long chains. It's electrically conductive, so you can attach it to your positive lead, and you'll conduct the electricity, or it'll receive the electrons rather, and it'll work as your sacrificial metal, even though it's not really technically a metal. So it works really well. It's not toxic because it's just carbon. So yeah, carbon works really well in the form of graphite. I actually bought some mechanical pencil leads or graphite today, and I don't have them with me, but I'm going to use those for future experiments into electrolysis. Another thing I've noticed is let's see if I can show you. So just for the sake of demonstration here real quick, we'll hook up, we'll hook up this quarter to the positive lead and pretend that's my sacrificial metal. I'm only going to do this for a second. So we will be generating a little bit of heavy metal waste here, but it should be pretty negligible. And let's move this out for a second. Let's leave that in there. Actually, this will prove a good point. So let me make sure you can see that. Okay, so I'm trying to be quick here. So right now there's not a whole lot of reaction going on, but we can show exactly how much is happening. So here's a little, it's really technically a battery test meter, but if you'll watch the needle, I don't know if you can see that. Let's try getting a little closer there. Okay. Bear with me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to move my power source over here. So power source is this battery here, right here. So what I'm doing, I'll tell you, you won't be able to see it. So I'm going to test the amount of current coming through the water. I'm going to test the positive lead. I'm going to measure kind of the efficiency of this system. So I don't know if you can see here. So I have got the negative lead of the voltmeter, the battery tester really, hooked up to the negative lead of the battery. Make sure that's in there really good. That's pretty good. Yeah, that's good. And the positive lead, now be careful with electricity and water. So I'm just dipping the tip of this into the solution. Let's do it from this side so you can see the little voltmeter. Okay, you see that's coming up. So this is transmitting pretty well. transmitting pretty well. Okay, so what that's there's enough current flowing through the water to measure, and I'm measuring the current. I'm measuring the positive terminal here. I realize my physics, the way I'm saying things, isn't exactly correct. So let's look at what amount of current is being transmitted from the negative terminal. And again, the physics aren't exactly right on this, but this is a good way, kind of a metaphor to think of it. So if you look here, that needle is barely moving. Why is that? Why is that? Well, it has to do with the fact that this metal is really dirty. So if I were to change this out, I would say something that's clean, another quarter here. Put that in the clips and submerge it. You'll notice, I don't know if you can see it in the video, but you'll notice on that quarter there's kind of some foam coming off, and that's hydrolysis taking place. You can kind of see that there. See those bubbles? That's the hydrolysis taking place. So now, if I'm going to test the same negative lead here, I'm going to dip the tip in the water and watch the voltmeter now. It's coming up a little higher. Here's the difference. If I touch it, see how much current's flowing through there, or voltage, I guess. So if your metal is really dirty, like this horseshoe, the electrolysis process is going to take a lot longer. So if you expose some of the metal by scratching it, which is going to be a little damaging to the metal, but if you expose some of it, you can get a better connection and more electrons can flow from your metal you're trying to clean to your sacrificial metal. So I'm still working out the system, but in kind of synopsis here, what points I'm trying to make is if you're going to do this inside, be very careful. If you're going to use table salt as your electrolyte, or your salt that you're putting in the water, make sure to do this outside. If you're using baking soda, still be careful because it generates hydrogen sulfide gas, which turns into sulfuric acid in your lungs. Also, it generates hydrogen gas, which is flammable. If you're going to use your sacrificial metal, if you use stainless steel, or if you use steel as a sacrificial metal, the water will become filled with heavy metals, or in this case chromates, which are very harmful. If you use copper, you're still getting heavy metals. You can reclaim those in a process with zinc. I'm not exactly sure about the chemistry, how to do that exactly. But if you're using graphite, the water will not be contaminated in the same way. Graphite is pretty cheap. It's not quite as, doesn't have as large a surface area because it's hard to get a big piece of graphite. Also, make sure that your alligator clips on your, if you can, you can submerge your negative if you want to. But your positive, if you submerge it, it'll actually become dissolved. So it's better to partially submerge your sacrificial metal and then leave the clip out of the water, and keep your, I try to keep my negative clip out of the water, but it doesn't dissolve quite in the same way that the positive clip does. It will dissolve eventually. Yeah, so be careful with electrolysis. Now, this is only 6 volts DC current. So this, I can stick my finger in the water and then touch between the two. It doesn't, it's not going to hurt me. But yeah, so if you're, hooking up a lot of these in series, you can generate quite a bit of amperage. You can generate quite a bit of voltage. If you're using a battery charger, you can generate some voltage and definitely some amperage. You have to be careful with that. So this is a little safer, I think, for my uses. So here's what it looks like something. So for those of you who know a little bit about electrolysis, the opposite of this process is electroplating. So this is technically, I guess you would call it electroplated. So I use this as my sacrificial metal, and I half submerged it. Let's see if I can get you there where you can see. There you go. So I submerged half of this in the solution, and then I allowed some tarnish from another coin to migrate to this coin. You can see I technically I would say electroplated this quarter halfway. So that's kind of a neat trick. So yeah, be careful with electrolysis. I'm still working the bugs out of it. I would love to hear your suggestions. But yeah, that's all for now. And when I get a little better system going, I'll come back to you and give you a better video. Yeah, those are my tips, what I've learned, and I can't wait to hear what you guys have learned and how I can do this better. So that's all for tonight. Thanks.